looking, laying it off. Costa! Hat trick!
Ariel sends it in off of Gressel. Ooh! Made it to Elliott. Oh, the bicycle! Julian Carranza! A spectacular finish! Philadelphia doubles its lead!
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and we're back yet again. Another episode. No episode last week because I was on the AAT Sports podcast feed with Mike Jose and Mark Kelkenberg to talk MLS draft or lack of MLS draft. And keeping with the tradition, I don't know, maybe we make this a weekly thing where we spend 1 week on AAT Sports, the other week on the Free Kick podcast feed. I'm joined once again by my good friend, Jose Nunez. Jose, thank you, as always, for joining the podcast. And look, we tried to tell the people a few weeks ago that there was going to be content. Yes, the Union did not make the playoffs, but, you know, that meant that there was probably going to be even more ambition that the club needed to show after missing out on the playoffs. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about, the moves regarding Alejandro Bedoya coming back for another season, Jack Elliott going to the Chicago Fire, a new center back that is reported to be on his way to Philadelphia Union. And I think something that maybe is a little bit under the radar, and that's exactly what we'll start the show with, is where the Union will be spending part of their season in part of the time in preseason this year. And before we talk about that, Jose, how are you? I should ask you that at the beginning.
No. Gosh, you don't ever have to apologize for not asking that. I'm doing fine, man. I'm feeling good. I'm getting ready here for the holidays. As you very well know, I have two boys and obviously my lovely wife and this dumb golden retriever that's next to me. So everybody is healthy. We had a little bit of an illness going on and passing around the house yesterday, or this past week, I should say, last weekend or so. So everybody's recovered. We're trying to push through until this holiday break where everybody's just at home. We don't have vectors of daycare, work, etc. So you were right. You said it best, man. And I think we hinted at it with the fact that even though the Union did not make the playoffs, this team is not going to stop in terms of making news in some way, shape, or form. And what a perfect example that was this week, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it was the perfect example. Don't want to miss this comment. Chris says, "Hi, everybody. Hello, Chris. Thank you for tuning in with Jose and I." But, you know, it's interesting because I think what we're doing is probably the smart thing to do, where we're not taking away views from either one of our shows with you at AAT Sports and then here at the Free Kick, where we talked about the draft, or the lack of, like I said in the intro, where we discuss, you know, the Union trading away all of the draft picks for the next 3 years. And we're not going to talk about any of that stuff. You know, if you guys want to hear our comments or thoughts on all that, listen to last week's episode of AAT Sports. And now here we are talking about the latest news, like I said. And yeah, we try to warn people, and I'm glad that I'm glad maybe some people listened to us, because we weren't kidding when we said that there was going to be news. And I hinted at it. I went out of order of how we were going to do the show. I started with what we're talking about last, and then the first thing we're talking about is where the Union will be spending their preseason this upcoming season, where, you know, the last 10 years it's been down in Florida. And this season, while I get it up here on the screen, they're going to be spending part of the preseason in Spain. And you're the one who actually broke this news last week, I want to say. And like I said, it got lost under the radar because of, you know, the Union trading away their draft picks last week, and then the Union announcing on Monday that Alejandro Bedoya is coming back. Jack Elliott announced he's no longer going to be with the club. And so I feel like this went under the radar a little bit. So if you want to go ahead and speak about this, Jose, by all means, you have the floor.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, you know, and you sort of get to see how some of this stuff happens live, right? Where, you know, I sort of hear about it and then I'm working through it. And then I you know, you and Mike and others sort of like, okay, here's what I've heard. This is how it's written. Once I've done my work in terms of, and first and foremost, I never publish off of just a single source, unless that source is the actual subject. So I usually look for a second more than likely even a third. Some would call it overkill. I call it assurance because I don't miss, and I don't want to miss, and will probably never miss if I continue to keep it this way. But yeah, interesting. I had heard late last week, I think it was. When was this? The 12th. So that was whenever it was, late at night, that there were rumblings that the Union were going to sort of break tradition and revert back to what they had done in terms of sources telling me that the team will be traveling to Spain to spend a portion of the preseason, which again is just very, very different from their two-phase approach. And this will be, as I understand it, two-phase as well, but one of them, and the length of time is also sort of missing, so I apologize, but going to Spain and then coming back, and that actually opens up a Pandora's box worth of questions. But ultimately, that's what it comes down to. The Union will be in Spain. Who they will play, I have heard some rumblings, but not enough to feel comfortable sharing, and it's interesting. But ultimately, it's FC Dallas and Vancouver did it last year, and they played the likes of AA Aalborg, where gosh, who was the player that the Union had? I'm sorry?
Odada.
Yeah, Richard Odada. Thank you. Norway's Odds BK, and even Hamburger SV out in the second division of Germany, the Bundesliga too. So could that be who they play? Maybe. Could it be different teams? Maybe. But, when you're in Spain, you sort of got to think about strategically where other clubs are in the region. Obviously, they're not going to come to the U.S. So can you take advantage of European competition, this is some decent clubs there. Are they MLS level? Maybe. Are they above MLS? I'm not sure. That's for you to decide. But nonetheless, a really, really interesting approach that they're taking this year, whether it's forced or not, with everything that happened in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you had Seattle Sounders last year spending time in Spain, and you also had Vancouver spend 3 weeks in Marbella in Spain last year for their preseason. So this isn't like this is the first time, like you said, Dallas spent part of the preseason last year, and this isn't the first time, and I'm sure this won't be the last time that we see an MLS team go to Spain. And yeah, I think some people would say, well, why would you go to Spain? And I saw some comments on social media where they're like, man, all this traveling they're not a fan of and everything. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not against this, and you're going to be scheduling games against potentially higher competition than what you see in MLS. And here's another thing too. I think maybe fans aren't really thinking of is, okay, maybe the Union. I'm going to be shocked if the Union broadcast these games. I mean, let alone when they're down in Florida, they rarely ever broadcast these games. So who's to say, new manager coming in, who's to say that they don't try new things out, and they don't want MLS teams to get an early look at tactics and how they plan on playing. I mean, I think we all know that the Union are going to get back to playing that 4-4-2 pressing system. They got away from it a little bit. And again, that's what Jim Curtin did not do last year. And that's part of the reason why Ernst Tanner said, we got away from being us. And that's part of the reason why Jim was unfortunately let go. But yeah, I think this is a good move, and who doesn't want to be in a warm weather climate in Spain? And maybe for some of these players, is their first time ever going to Spain, and they get to experience a Spanish culture. And I don't know, maybe it leads to a player or two getting sold eventually to Spain. Who knows? I'm just speaking, not saying anything's going to happen, but I don't know. You never know. I mean, look, the amount of kids in the Union's academy that get looked at by scouts internationally. I mean, look no further than Karen Sullivan at 14 years old getting signed by Manchester City. I mean, Jim Curtin said it plenty of times publicly and all fair that there's scouts at every single Union practice from clubs all over the world. And so I don't know. Look, the Union get to take the club overseas now, and they don't have to have scouts come to America to watch some of these kids. And we'll see what happens. But I do think this is definitely an intriguing opportunity for all. And look, we all know about the hurricanes that happened down in Florida, and maybe that plays a part into it. And glad to see the club still going down to Florida and keeping that tradition of 10 plus years going down there. And another thing to keep in mind is that the training complex, a big part of the reason the Union wanted this complex was to have an indoor training facility with how cold it gets in Philadelphia, and how, okay, look, if it's snow on the ground, if the ground's frozen solid, we'll go inside and practice. And so that facility is not done yet. It's getting close, and I'll be curious to see how much progress has been made. I don't know if you paid attention as the season went on, Jose, just how much progress they really made on those practice fields in the back. But yeah, it seems like they're getting that thing closer and closer to being finished.
Yeah, one thing I do want to mention is that during last year's preseason, I do remember watching at least one FC Dallas match while they were out in Spain. Who they faced, I can't remember, but I do recall that they had a game available for people to watch. Now, as always, it comes down to teams' preferences. I'm sure there's budgetary issues, whether or not they want to pay for the equipment, though. I think the average press person like you and I, and certainly the average fan, or maybe the super avid fan, would be totally okay with literally a tripod and a phone, Facebook live streaming a match and just, swiveling back and forth. So there's that. The one thing I do want to touch base on, though, in terms of this topic, and I sort of hinted at it, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with, this coinciding with an international window that's domestic for the USA in January, right? In terms of, are there any Union players that are getting called up? And if so, are they going to be released to be part of that international camp, US camp, considering that there's going to be, or there should be at that point, maybe a new coach that would be interested in having everybody that he will be managing there present and taking it all in all at once. So I think that's one of the bigger questions, honestly, and one of the biggest pivots in terms of all this. Because even if it was in Florida, you would probably question it, but you're also getting into how difficult of a decision that is, right? Because it's such a point of pride for players to go and represent their nations, but also I can totally see where there's a new manager and you want to get off to the right step with them, take the first step the right way with them in the relationship, and making sure that they know that you're all in. But ultimately, you and I both know that international caps, international appearances, whatever term you want to use, do help the value of a player, which the Union would not be afraid of to, again, a selling club. It's no secret. Help out, the bolster the value of some of these players by just getting one more cap, whether it's US or wherever else. It'll be really, really interesting to see. I just wanted to sort of highlight that point, and I think more news will come soon about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point too. That's being missed. And look, I mean, for those guys that want to impress a new manager with the Union, whenever that gets announced, those players also want to impress Mauricio Pochettino. And so you have two managers that these players want to try to impress. And with the World Cup coming up in 2026, I feel like there's not going to be many opportunities for some of these MLS players to get call-ups. And sure, I mean, Pochettino, I think, said in an interview that, look, he'll look at all U.S.-based players. It doesn't matter if you play in MLS or not, but this is a perfect opportunity to get a look at a ton of MLS players. And we've seen Union players in the past. Jack McGlynn and Nate Harriel, I believe, both got called up last year to some cupcake. And look, it eventually led to them both getting the final spots for the Olympic squad in this past summer. And so I do think that, and this is intriguing, and I can see where if you're a player and if you're a coach, you don't want to lose those players because, you want to get to know these guys. Yeah, you can watch game film, but, game film's not going to tell the whole story of building those relationships in person, seeing how they train in person and everything. And so definitely curious to see when those rosters are announced for the U.S. and any other call-ups that may or may not come. But regardless, Union going to be spending part of their preseason in Spain. A change of scenery for this club, how they typically do the preseason. Florida is still in play, but we'll see. We'll see how long they stay in Spain for, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it. So we'll definitely see these guys come back a lot tanner, that's for sure, while all of us are pale in the wintertime. So
yeah, February or whenever they decide to start the season will be really interesting for some of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's go ahead, and Michael chimes in, says, "Hey gang, what's up, Michael? Thank you for joining us." Philly Rivers, thank you as well for joining. Says, one of their Spanish travels, talking about the clubs that we talked about at the beginning of the show that last year in FC Dallas and Vancouver and Seattle, playing over in Spain and playing against a lot of Scandinavian clubs. So we'll see. Will the Philadelphia Union face off against some of those clubs this preseason? We shall see. But the next,
what do you think? What do you think, Todd? If it was, I can see, and I'm just totally speculating. I have no inside knowledge, but I could see a Lingby friendly. Obviously,
Yeah,
that makes sense. The two brands going up against each other in a way. What if Marcus Anderson's old team, Rayo Majadahonda or whatever it was, sort of makes an appearance? Though that's like third division of Spain. You'd hope that the Union would be able to draw a bigger opponent than that. But like, or gosh, I don't know, go and play against Sanders' old team, right? Like, yeah. So
right now.
yeah, God, even
Bromby. Yeah. And then Horsens, I think, is the club that he's at right now in Denmark. I mean,
yeah, the possibilities are there. I mean, and it's most of those clubs are good competition. It's just who makes the most sense. And frankly, at this
Brøndby, Michael Uhr's old club.
Yeah, Brøndby. At this point, though, I do wonder. I can't imagine that a coach would have a say at this point. I'm guessing this is all Ernst Tanner and company sort of dictating rather than a coach. You know, not all coaches are Peps, right? Like Pep would tell you exactly who they want to play against, and it's like we're doing that, and that's it. I feel like Ernst probably takes control of that. That's an interesting question to dig around on, but we'll see. Sorry, didn't want to interject.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely spent more time, but the comments came in and people were a little bit surprised by this news. So if you guys missed anything we talked about, you got to go ahead and rewind the last 17 minutes and hear Jose talking about that news. But going on to the next point of topics is Philadelphia Union shockingly announced the resigning of Alejandro Bedoya through 2025. And you and I have talked a lot about this topic. Will Bedoya be back? Does it make sense to bring back Alejandro Bedoya? It does not matter what our opinions are, Jose. The club decided, hey, look, let's bring back Bedoya for his 10th season, and LA's back. And I think when you look at Jim Curtin being gone, being let go at the end of the season, you know, it makes sense to have some kind of leader that's been around this club for a while that bleeds Philadelphia Union. If it's not Jim Curtin, it's Alejandro Bedoya. And a lot of fans, you know, I think are happy by this news, but they still want to see a lot more done with transfers coming in. And I'll go ahead and play a 24-second clip right here with Alejandro Bedoya. I was saving all this because honestly, I did not think Bedoya was coming back after the season. And he talked about his time in Philadelphia and how his kids were sick for the final game of the season, and how, you know, he wasn't wanting that to be how it ended with his kids not in the stadium, and how much the city of Philadelphia meant to him. But he was asked very first question or second question on the night. He was asked, you know, do you want to come back for the 2025 season?
Yeah. I mean, I still want to play physically and mentally. I feel good. I felt I've kind of embraced the new role that it's been given to me, right? Not being a week in and week out starter, but the times I've come in, I think I've contributed in a positive way. And hey, we got more wins this season with me starting than not. That's a stat for you guys. I'm sure you guys already knew that probably. I don't know.
Do you have any moments?
Is it awkward for you seeing yourself on the screen, Jose?
It is very awkward. In fact, I'm like looking at myself and I'm thinking, oh my God, like this came in quick. Yeah, interesting clip there, right?
Super interesting. I mean, he said he wanted to continue playing, and then he said a couple months before that on the Vamos podcast with Hercules Gomez that he still wanted to play. And then you heard that on the podcast, and when when the Union played against New York Red Bulls away at Red Bull Arena, you had asked Bedoya on those comments on the podcast, and I don't have that clip lined up. I think Jillian Almany posted it on Twitter if people want to go ahead and listen to that. But yeah, I mean, he doubled down, said, yeah, I want to continue playing in 2025, and took a shot at somebody that was also at the game with us in the media sphere. And then here's Bedoya, last game of the season, says, yes, I still want to continue playing. And we see Bedoya resign back again with the club. And I think a lot of fans are going to be happy. Sexy Hoagie, yes, I saw your comment. It says, finally, Bedoya resigns. Oh, wait, resigns. Yes, that's right. Which, I don't know, Jose, that's a pet peeve of mine. So many people say resigns. It's like, no, it's resigns. You got to No, it's so frustrating with that. But yeah, Bedoya back.
Yeah, I must admit, I like to think I have a pretty good pulse on what's happening on the union sphere. Uh, I did not expect this press release. In fact, I sort of had something pre-written for him retiring or moving on to a different team elsewhere, maybe an expansion team this year, maybe somewhere else on the East Coast. I don't know. I just had sort of like a Mad Lib style article, right? Like just filling in blanks as the news came out. So when this press release, I was shocked. I was really, really shocked, considering when you think about what happened just about a season and a half ago, right? In terms of the conversation, the 30-second conversation between Ernst Tanner and Alejandro Bedoya, and then the Athletic flying in and sort of talking to coach, to Jim, other people, Curtin, etc. And I don't know, just talking to everybody about the situation and getting commentary. And to me, it's just sort of like something really changed. And even when you look at the numbers, like from 23 to 24, Bedoya gave up about 60% of his salary to come back. I wonder what he's giving up to come back one more time. But I also wonder, I mean, a roster spot's a roster spot, right? Ernst Tanner told us that it was going to be between 25 to 27 players. I'm sure that's fluid, flexible, whatever term you want to use, but ultimately it's a cap that they have to work against. He takes up a roster spot even with this role in the front office and player development, whatever you want to call it. So nonetheless, like, he is a very valuable plot of land per se on a roster sheet. So it's also sort of like Ernst Tanner talking out of both sides of his mouth, right? In terms of talking about getting younger. So they move on from Flock, and that maybe was more of a personal thing. They move out from Elliott, which we'll talk about next, but bring back Alejandro Bedoya is sort of like whiplash in a way. And I can tell you in confidence, with confidence, I should say, that even people within the organization were shocked with the decision. That I think some even just like found out the day of that probably would have known otherwise. So I don't know, man. It's a decision. I'm excited to talk to him. He's always been super kind to all of us. I mean, I think about the times that we've talked to him after press conferences when things are well, when things are not going so well, and even when we're on the road, when we were out in New York, and he slightly begrudgingly spoke with the press, but nonetheless, he compliments us like, "Holy shit, there's a lot of you guys here for an away game." It's like, yeah, man,
You guys all
we're here.
like, yeah.
Yeah, we're all here for you. So welcome back, or continue to stay, and 10 seasons. That's incredible when you think that this is a club that's going into its 16th year. So congrats to Bedoya. We'll see what happens after this year, though. That to me is another big question that will continue to rear its ugly head as an inevitable injury happens or some sort of rest that he needs to take. It'll be really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple quick stats here for Bedoya. So he's second in club history in MLS in appearances for the Union with 244. Second in starts with 217. Minutes played, 19,349. Eighth most goals in team history, 24. Third in assists, 37. That's including MLS hockey assists. One of only 4 players in club history to have 20-plus goals and 20-plus assists each. The other 3 players are Sebastian Letou, Ilsinho, and Daniel Gazdag. This is what I find so fascinating, is that the Union have reached the playoffs 7 out of the 9 seasons that Bedoya has been at the club. I mean, ever since he came over from FC Nantes in Ligue 1, he's completely transformed this club. And yes, it's not just Alejandro Bedoya. It's Ernie Stewart getting things right towards the end of his tenure, hiring Ernst Tanner. And I know a lot of fans right now are like, nope, get Ernst Tanner out. But he's done a lot to turn this club around. And how many players has he found that nobody's ever heard of? And he'll continue to find players that nobody's ever heard of. And I think we're talking about one of those players later on in the show. But Ernst Tanner's done a lot of good for this club. And yeah, you can say not so much lately. And Bedoya has done a lot for this club. And Bruce brings it up right here, and you were talking about it a little bit, Jose, about the veteran leadership with this team getting younger and younger, and you move on from a Jose Martinez, even during the season, that's one of your older veteran players. You move on from a Jack Elliott now. You move on from a Damian Lowe, who wasn't with the club for a long time, but he has MLS experience. He has international experience. And I think he's a player that was in that locker room that a lot of guys respected. You move on from a Leon Flock, who, okay, wasn't the oldest guy, but yet when you look at a CJ Oney, when you look at a Neil Peer coming in, when you look at a David Vasquez, a Kevin Sullivan, and Andrew Rick, Leon Flock's older than those guys. And so you do have to have those veteran players. Bruce says signing Bedoya was a smart move, especially with the team going younger. He would be great as a veteran leader. And not only that, the club announced and said that he'll continue his front office role, which is, a way for MLS roster mechanisms for the cap hit and everything. And that allows you to bring in more players. And Ernst Tanner, you talked about it. It said 25, 27 players the club is looking at. And yeah, maybe if they get a good deal on a player, yeah, you go over that number. But the way I look at it is you're playing in less competitions. We don't know what's going on with US Open Cup, Leagues Cup. You talked about this a couple days ago, and maybe we save that for next week's show with AAT Sports. I don't know. Talk about the changes coming to the Leagues Cup. But Ernst Tanner talked about how the Union wouldn't be in that competition next season. No Champions Cup for the Union. And so it's looking like potentially just MLS for this club. We'll see what happens, like I said, with US Open Cup. But do you really need a roster size of 30, 31 players? I don't think so when you're only playing one competition. And you talk about wanting to give young players a chance. Well, you sign in more players to the club, you're going to take away minutes from those younger players. And we'll see where the roster stands. And that's why I'm scratching my head a little bit, because Bedoya makes number 25. And then if you bring back Brandon Craig, Ernst Tanner said that the club was in negotiations. I'm not sure where they stand. I'm not sure, Jose, if you've heard anything. If you have, feel free to share. If not, that's totally fine too. But if you bring back Brandon Craig, that's 26. Neil Pierre would make 27. And then Ian Glavinovich, who we're talking about here in a bit, would make 28. And Ernst Tanner also said in that end of the season press conference that they want to bring in a striker, that they were going to upgrade every area of their squad. You haven't brought in a midfielder yet. And so I wonder, do we see the club bring in a midfielder? Do they still go after that striker? I mean, looking at this roster, I think a lot of fans will tell you this team's not better than what that roster was last year, where you had a Julian Kranza to start the season, a Jose Martinez, a Damian Lowe, all three players no longer at the club. Yes, you go out and bring in a Sam Adeniran, and I know he didn't do much, but look, I think as this roster stands right now, it's not in a better place than it was last season. Bringing in Bedoya is a good step to solidify, his role as the leader, as Mr. Philadelphia Union in the squad. But, you bring in a new coach, and this guy's going to learn the culture of Philadelphia Union. He's going to learn the culture of MLS, and you want a player that's been through it all, and who better than Alejandro Bedoya?
Yeah, and again, I mean no disrespect whatsoever to Bedoya, none whatsoever. But I see this as a net neutral in terms of what this does for the squad. Of course, he has showered us with and waxed poetic with his what was his line, Todd? The team has won more when I'm starting, or yeah. He's also waxed poetic about, the metrics say that I am still very productive, and he goes and sort of like lists one or two things, and it's just like, okay, brother, like that's cool, that's great, and I appreciate you, and good for you for representing yourself well and doing all this research and hiring people to do that for you. But I actually think he's been negotiating his last couple of deals, if I recall him mentioning that too. So good on him for getting this done by himself or with the help of others and contracting people. But your point is so valid. I don't see how this roster's better than it was when they started the season, considering the pieces that they've lost. And sure, they brought in Danley, and he has stuck around, obviously, but I don't know that it is that. I would say it's substantially worse, considering that Jose Martinez is kicking it in Corinthians, and obviously Carranza is killing it. When he's playing, he's doing okay at Feyenoord. So he just needs more, as weird as it is, like he needs more Santi Santi Martinez, Santi Jimenez injuries for him to get more time over in Feyenoord. So yeah, we'll see, man. I'm excited to see Bedoya. I can't wait to request some sort of meeting with him in some way, shape, or form. I think maybe I've earned that right too, and just sort of walk through it. And I'm sure many people want to talk to him, and he's obviously. This is an interesting question. I wonder if he continues as the full-time captain as he has been over the last couple of seasons with 1 or 2 behind. I wonder if he just completely gives it up.
Yeah, they never even mentioned that anything about the captaincy in the press release, and so I think that's for the new coach to decide whenever that gets announced. Mike joins in here. What's up, Mike? Says, curious how the new coach uses Bedoya, as I don't think fans want to see the same usage he had this last year from Curtin. Yeah, looking at the numbers, I mean, Bedoya in MLS played the 10th most minutes, won the team with 1,448 minutes, tied for third most appearances, 30, 2 goals and 2 assists last year for the club, made 13 starts, and the Union made how many wins last year? Was it? No, it wasn't 5. It was 8. I don't know. I mean, it's such a long
bad.
Or 9, something like that. I don't know. It was really, really bad. 4 wins at home. I mean, 4. That's why I'm thinking of 4. I mean, last season at home, the Union can't have another season like that at Subaru Park. And yeah, last year was historically bad, and I'd be shocked to see that again. 9 wins was the most the Union had last year. 5 on the road, 4 at Subaru Park. But yeah, I mean. I'm curious too. How will the new manager use Alejandro Bedoya? And I think that's part of the reason why they never said Union resigned club captain Bedoya, because who's to say that the new manager is going to give Bedoya that captaincy? Michael joins in here. He says definitely need to buff up the roster if this is mostly it, we in trouble. Yeah, for sure. And I think if the Union have another season where they go and miss the playoffs, that seat gets hotter and hotter for Ernst Tanner. Because look, he goes and has that conversation with Jay Sugarman and says, hey, look, we need to move on from Jim Curtin. This will take us to the next level, or whatever the case may be. We need to move on from him. And if they miss the playoffs again for a second year, that seat's got to get higher and higher. And we'll see exactly what happens. But let's go ahead and talk about, unless you have anything else to say about Bedoya.
No, I mean, I have more questions than answers, frankly. And again, I was shocked, and people within the org were also shocked. So it's to me a fascinating development, and one that was kept pretty tight in terms of developing. So happy for them. They got to do their video, they got to do their pose, they got to do their everything without some idiot like myself spoiling it like I did last year, I suppose. But nonetheless, I'm excited to see Bedoya at the Union campus, and hopefully they figure out some way to get media in front of them before Spain. But it never really happened when they were even going to Florida. So what the heck, why would they change anything?
All right, so the last thing I'll say about this topic is Union didn't do a media game this season, and I hope they bring that back next year. And I'm sure you pay attention to this, but last year when Inter Miami did theirs, they had DeAndre Yedlin when he was at the club, or maybe this was 2 years ago, I forget. But they had, and Gressel maybe was last year, but regardless, they had players be the coaches for the media teams. I would love Alejandro Bedoya to be the coach for one of these teams at next year's media game. Hopefully it happens. And can you imagine how hard he would ride some of the media members for giving him crap over the years? And Bedoya would never let them hear the end of it. I mean, he'd be like, come on, hustle. What are you doing? Like, oh my God, I would love to see that. Watch Coach Bedoya for a media game. Would be fantastic.
That would be comical, but I don't know, man. We'll see. It'll be interesting. I mean, San Diego had a media game before even kicking the ball for the first time ever. So there's that. So yeah, we'll see. Let's go on to the next topic.
But that is Chicago Fire. You talked about being surprised. I don't think either one of us are surprised that Jack Elliott leaving the Philadelphia Union and going to Chicago Fire. But I think maybe when we initially saw this, we were a little bit surprised, and the Fire said that they signed Jack Elliott through 2025 with an option for 2026. And yeah, a lot of mixed emotions on social media for Jack Elliott leaving the club. And look no further than Jack Elliott's comments on social media. He announced that he was leaving the club before Chicago Fire announced anything, before the Union went and announced that Jack was leaving. Trying to pull it up here on the stream. right here. There we go. Jack Elliott said on Instagram, quote, after months of back and forth and 8 years with the club, I'm disappointed to announce my time in Philadelphia has come to a close. Philadelphia has become home to me, but the time has come where I have to stay true to myself and know my own worth. Looking back on my time with the Philadelphia Union, I feel immensely proud of the steps forward we took, the things we accomplished when no one believed we could. From the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, I'm proud of how I carried myself throughout my time here, and each experience has shaped me into the man and player I am today. I made lifelong friendships here, and I will miss my teammates who were with me through it all. I wore the Philadelphia Union badge with pride, and I never took a second for granted. I thank every fan, teammate, coach, and trainer involved in my journey. From a 4th-round draft pick to where I am now, it's time I bet on myself, and I truly believe this is just the beginning for me. I'm incredibly proud, excited, and hopeful for what is ahead. It is goodbye for now. I leave a piece of my heart in Philadelphia. Thank you, Union. Jack Elliott, number 3, end quote. Yeah, pretty emotional statement there. And the thing that gets me is, man, he's disappointed that his time in Philadelphia has come to a close. Philadelphia, we all know, it's where he met his girlfriend, fiance, now wife, expecting a child. You know, Philadelphia has become Jack Elliott's true home, and, you know, talked about wanting to bet on himself. He thinks the best ahead, and I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, he said in his comments here that he's disappointed to announce that he's leaving the club. And then eventually the Chicago Fire came out and announced that he was a new signing. And yeah, it's strange not going to see Jack Elliott anchor Jacob Glesnes on the back line. But when you look at how the season went, everybody knew that changes to that back line needed to happen. And I think fans have been calling for a change the last couple of years. I mean, hell, I've been saying on this show that a lot of players on this team have been worn into the ground with the way that the Union want to play with their pressing system. And if you want to keep playing pressing soccer, you've got to get new players. And as much as it hurts to see Jack Elliott leave the club, a player that, yeah, he's right, 4th-round draft pick. I mean, we don't see many 4th-rounders making an MLS anymore. And I don't even think we have a 4th-round draft anymore in MLS. And now we see MLS isn't even going to broadcast the 2025 Super Draft. So that tells you where MLS stands on that. But yeah, to see Jack Elliott leave, I mean, it's a little bit upsetting, but I do think from a business standpoint, it's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah, and let's not lose sight that the Philadelphia Union could have triggered his 2025 club option and said, brother, you're staying here whether you like it or not. So I just want to make that, apparent, right? That the Union could have kept them in Philadelphia despite them trying to negotiate something new and sort of just wrote out the contract. Obviously, this was not advantageous to the club in many ways. Sure, they released the salary and the budget charge, etc. But ultimately, like, the Union are getting zero from what was probably the top, if not one of the top, one of the top draft picks to ever come out of the MLS draft. Again, you said it. There's no longer 4th-round picks in the MLS draft. Never mind shows that actually show it. And gosh, to think back about some of those shows and the entire production that used to be with the scarf around the neck and having them come up to the stage and talk for a minute or two, that type of thing. Just, it's a huge miss, especially such a veteran, and some would argue not even the worst defender in the team that should have gone. So obviously that's based on opinion and maybe even metrics, but nonetheless, not here to have that argument. So I don't know. I wish him luck. I do wonder what Chicago offered him. I sense that, with him being at nearly $900,000 last year, his option probably pushed him into 9 something, or would have pushed him into 9 something. I'm guessing that Chicago came and just threw a bag at him and made him a really high paid TAM player, something that Philadelphia, I'm sure, was not willing to do. And digging more and talking to people, I'm guessing that, the numbers were good, just not quite what Elliott's camp wanted. So wish him luck and nothing but the best. And when Chicago come to town, maybe he's one to go and try to talk to see how his experience is going so far.
or go out to Chicago. It's a lovely place to stay for a couple days, but Jose says no. Come on, dude, you got to go out to Soldier Field. But yeah, I mean, speaking about that contract, the union announced it on November 26th, I believe the date was, that they were still in negotiations with Jack Elliott with potentially trying to bring him back. And Ernst Tanner at his end of the season press conference was asked about Jack Elliott, and this is a 12-second clip on where things stand with Jack Elliott at the time.
With Jack, it's a little bit different as he turned down an offer which was really respective and looking for more money, and that's what we cannot do just in regards of roster flexibility.
So, I mean, Ernst says it right there that in his opinion, that he thought it was a respectable offer, but Jack Elliott was looking for more money, turned it down. And yes, the union had a club option for Elliott in 2025. And I don't know what that number is. And I don't know if we'll ever get to see what that number is. I don't think, because now he signed a new contract with Chicago Fire, I don't think there's any way that we would be able to see that by MLSPA unless you talk to Jack Elliott or his agency. And I'm sure they would know what the number was, or maybe other people within the organization. But it's like, okay, how badly do we want to know that information? But yeah, Ernst Tanner said it right there that they tried to bring him back and he turned down the offer. And it's unfortunate that Jack Elliott didn't want to re-sign with the union, but at the same time, I totally get it. I mean, it's a business, and it's like you only get one career. I think I said this in one of our group chats that we're in, and I don't blame Jack Elliott for chasing the bag, so to say. There was 21 center backs last season in MLS that were paid higher than him, and I think a number that you and I could definitely see is around the 1.1, 1.2 $1 million range for Jack Elliott. I mean, there's a lot of center backs ahead of him that are getting paid more than him that are definitely not at the level that he's at. And yeah, Jack Elliott didn't have a fantastic season for the club. And you said it, Jose, that there would be some fans, maybe even some people in the media that would tell you that that there's center backs that were on this roster that had a worse season than Jack Elliott, that Jack Elliott wasn't the worst center back on the team. And yeah, he was covering for a Jacob Glesnes, a Damian Lowe for being so aggressive last season. And yeah, it got caught out because they're pushing so high up on the field, trying to win the ball back. Now it's 2v1. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but changes had to come. And again, I guess maybe it goes back to bringing back Bedoya. If you were going to rebuild this team, and Mike brought up a point here, and again, I know we said 30 minutes and I don't want to get to an hour, so we'll try to keep this close. But Mike says there needs to be real convo for this club. If ownership flat out says we are in a rebuild, this roster isn't good enough. And yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, Mike, and you bring back Bedoya, and it's like, how can you say you're in a rebuild? Which they didn't say they're in a rebuild. Let's get that clear. But how can you bring back Bedoya if it looks like you're trying to go younger and younger? But you do need that veteran presence. You do need that leadership in the locker room. But yeah, I do think from a business standpoint that this was probably the best move to move on from Jack Elliott. And his contract was up after the season, so it makes it a lot easier to move on from that than a Jacob Glesnes, because if you were to move on from a Jacob Glesnes, you got to try to find a trade partner, and nobody's willing to trade for him. Then you have the option of buying him out, and I don't think the union would have bought out Jacob Glesnes' contract.
God, that would be a crazy move. I would suggest buying out some other player before Glesnes, honestly. So I am happy for Jack in a way, right? Like, go ahead and do what you got to do. And I also want to comment, man, like, some media folks right now talking about this deal are just so unbelievably uninformed and just talking about it in such a weird way. And I'm not here to tell you what flavor the bottom of Ernst Tanner's shoe is, because I'm not a bootlicker by any stretch of the imagination. I think I'm a sensible person, but the way that the union are being characterized in this whole back and forth between Jack is interesting, because in having talked a little bit today, it's the picture is not being painted right. And of course, they're not going to go and disclose information about, a negotiation with a player and its agent. So I would just say, they tried, and you just got to feel happy for Jack. Ultimately, he's going to go where he wants to be and make money while he's at it and getting ready for his first child, I'm guessing.
Yes,
I don't know. Yeah, his very first child. So happy for him. And good luck. I don't know. Best of luck as they go at it.
Mike says, would you have kept Elliott if Bedoya had been let go? Ooh, that's a good question. I think. Oh well, I've said it before, and I think I said it on your podcast, Mike, that I would have resigned Alejandro Bedoya, and I think still, yes, I would have brought back Bedoya over Jack Elliott because you got to get younger back there in your defensive cover in your center backs, and yes, they have lots of midfielders, a lot of young midfielders coming up, and not saying that Bedoya is going to start every single game, and his minutes definitely dwindled down, but. Yeah, I definitely would have brought back Bedoya instead of Jack Elliott if it was between those two players. Jose, I don't know if you want to take that or not.
I'm of the mind of if you're gonna reset and go the young route, like go at it hard. Bedoya is such an outlier for this club when it comes to the average age and especially the position that he's in on the field in terms of the midfield band. How many players are there that could probably slot in and play and the minutes that Bedoya is going to potentially be taking up? We'll see what the new manager wants to do with him. And frankly, I would have kept Elliott and, go halfway through the season, use that. And I see you, Michael. I see where you're going there. Bedoya is cheaper. But think about this. What if they would have exercised the club option, gone through half of the season, realized whether or not they're going to make the playoffs or not going to make the playoffs? And shoot, man, if they're not going to make the playoffs, then continue to offload players and you get some sort of value for Elliott, albeit super small, but nonetheless, you're not letting him walk away for free in a way. So those are just my 2 cents. I don't know, for what it's worth.
All right, so the last thing that we'll go ahead and talk about, and I'll let you take this one, Jose, because you're the one who started getting a lot of traction with these reports that Philadelphia Union are finalizing a deal to sign Newell's Old Boys center back Ian Glavinovich. I know we talked about this a little bit on AAT Sports Show, but I think this is very, very interesting, and this makes a lot of sense why you would move on from Jack Elliott if you're bringing in a new center back, a younger center back. I should add a 23-year-old. And Jose, you had broke this, and then we started seeing more and more reports coming out of Spain that the Union are looking to finalize a deal for a center back. So, go ahead, Jose, take it away.
Yeah, no. As I understand it, they're finalizing the deal. They're very, very close. He may or may not be in Philadelphia already. I had heard rumblings that he may even had gotten a tour already of the stadium within the last 48 hours. Again, as I'm hearing things. So they're in the final stages. I'm sure a physical is happening sooner rather than later. He's one that I'm sure they're expecting to perform right away. He is a very, very interesting player, 23, young, maybe a little undersized for the position, but nonetheless carries a lot of, I don't know. And watching film and watching video as much as I could, he only has realistically 30 games under his belt, with the majority of them coming in 2024. And Paramount Plus doesn't do a great job with the Argentinian league in terms of replay availability. It's sort of like if you don't watch last week's match, you're never going to see it again type of thing. And I tried my best, but very agile, aggressive, not I don't want to say reckless, but not Damian Lowe like in terms of his aggressiveness and pushing forward, but can find a pass. And I think the point to stress here is he was on the verge, as it's reported, to join Vasco da Gama out in Brazil. So he was very, very close to making his move there. And it was a similar move, but with a loan with some sort of loan fee and a permanent transfer option with a sell-on clause. So 2.5 million is what was reported, and a sell-on clause of 20%. So is that identical to what the Union got? I'm not sure. All I know is that there is a sell-on, a transfer fee or a buy fee in case they want to do it, and certainly a loan fee, which is very different than someone like Hamir Berdesio, who was always destined to be a Union 2 player, but also did not have a loan fee and an astronomically low price to purchase should they had wanted the Bolivian. So really fascinating move. I'm really excited. I know 2.5 million is, if they were to buy him for the 2026 season, is still not breaking any records here in Philadelphia. Never mind breaking any type of record across MLS, but ultimately a player that has also been called up to the Argentina 2020 under 23 squad and playing with a Thiago Almada and some other really, really respectable names. So I think it's a sound move. And again, if Vasco da Gama, one of the biggest clubs or a really big club and Brazil is interested in bringing you in, you're probably a pretty darn good player.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we talked about this on the phone, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were doing the show last week with Mike, Mark, yourself, and me, we we saw you a little bit distracted. And I think that was because you started to get texts in about this deal going through, and as you started to learn more and more about this player,
Todd, I was getting texts in Spanish from people in Argentina, and then you guys were piping in my ear with English, and my brain was just like going different ways. It was unbelievable. I do want to address Valerie's comment. As I understand it, is Ian Glavinovich, which is just, like the Argentinian way to pronounce, I would think, Glavinovich, but half Croatian as well, which is interesting too. Not sure that he would ever want to represent, but I don't know. For what I'm worried, for what it's worth.
So not Philly Rivers, Winovich. I like that. I like that a lot.
It might be. I mean, I don't know. It honestly probably we'll have to
it's a
wait for
joke.
him to do his audio.
It's definitely a joke. It's definitely a joke saying that this is a winning signing. But
Oh,
agreed. Got to see how he pronounces his name. But I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting combination. Argentine, Croatian. I don't even know what you would call that person. I'm trying to think. Do I know any soccer players that have roots to both countries? I don't know. I mean, I'd have to do a deep dive, but I think he would have a easier time getting called into a full national team with Croatia than Argentina. But who's to say? I mean, look, Julian Kranza has aspirations to get called into Argentina, and I think that was part of the reason why he wanted to leave the Philadelphia Union and showcase himself, just like Tati Castellanos. And look, he's getting call ups with the Argentine national team and killing it with Lazio. So we'll see exactly what the future holds in terms of Ian's national team representation. But yeah, regardless, I think this is a promising move for the Union where, look, if the deal doesn't work out, then you don't have to buy him. And it's kind of like the Jack Elliott deal, right? Where they only signed him to a 1-year deal. And if he wets the bed, then you don't pick up the option for 2026. And I'm going to you spit that out. But look, I mean, it's a safe move by the Union. And Mike Barrera chimes in, says, this feels like a Danley move, getting rid of Martinez for a DJJ, getting rid of Elliott, and brings in this kid who not adding depth, just replacing. And again, I think there's a lot of players on this team that needed to be replaced. I mean, how many times have people in the media, have fans been saying you can't run it back, and shocked that they ran it back. And so it makes sense why you're, bringing in guys who look to be everyday starters for this club, and Stanley John Jock and Ian Glavinovich, and looking forward to seeing what else the Union do. Again, we started the show talking about Ernst Tenner saying they wanted to upgrade every position but goalkeeper. So let's see. Will they bring in a striker next? Will they bring in a midfielder next? I still think that they need a number 6. I think Danley's best as an 8, but we shall see what the club decides to do. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I know we said 30 minutes, Jose. I was thinking myself 45 minutes. We're at 54 minutes. As long as we didn't go an hour, I'm happy. We got content out for people. So next week, you got to join us all, people, on the AAT Sports feed, and we'll talk about Leagues Cup and what that new format looks like and whatever else topics come that way. But Jose, where can people find you? Any other thoughts on Ian? Anything else that we talked about? Addressing anybody in the comment section? Have at it.
Yeah, no, all I would say is that I'm sure there's going to be more news. I'm sensing that, and this is going back to November 27, when Ernst Tanner told us that, a manager was getting close to be announced. Obviously, I think some things have shifted and moved a little bit. So we'll see. I can't speak about that. Yeah, there's Sexy Hoagie. We'll see, Sexy. What a weird sentence. I'm so sorry.
Use your real name. Come on.
Yeah. What is it, Hoagie, that it happens to be attractive, apparently? I'm sure announcements will come. I'm most interest based on what I know, what has to do with the international call-ups and what comes from it. So that alone will be worthwhile talking. I just got to get my ducks in a row and let some more other information come through. So the show goes on. The season will continue to move, and we'll go from there. Everybody can find me at Jose. What is my handle? Jose R Nunes 91. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Jose R. Yeah, there I am. Jose R Nunes 91 on Twitter, and I have a Substack. It's pinned, and I always say it. If you are somebody who watches this, that is a player, or I should be saying it more. If you're a player, a coach, a staff member, USL player, and you're interested in connecting, do let me know. I do have a Signal account available if you want some full anonymity and just want to chat. I'm always available.
For sure. And if you guys aren't following the podcast, follow on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Free Kick Pod. Wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick. Check out the YouTube channel where we're here live currently. Also live on Twitter and Facebook, but the YouTube channel is at Free Kick Pod. And check out the Substack, thefreekick.substack.com. And yeah, a lot of fun talking Philadelphia Union. Glad to have Jose for like a fifth, sixth straight time. And makes the show a lot easier when it's not a solo show, but you guys also make this enjoyable too in the comment section. You guys are getting a little bit out of hand right now, and I'm sure I will have thoughts after the show. But again, thank you guys so much for just joining us tonight. A little bit last minute, like we always do it, but you guys show up and you guys keep the show alive. So I appreciate you guys. And if not,
AAT Sports next week. We're gonna talk
next
about. We'll keep this switching back and forth. I think that's pretty advantageous.
It is, like I said at the beginning, that it's we're not taking views away. It's like, okay, if you guys didn't see what we talked about last week, go check out that show. We're not going to talk about it on the other show. So it's like, yeah, if you want it bad enough, you go ahead and listen. So yeah, we're doing a good thing, but we're gonna go ahead and end it here. So with that said,
Todd says rip it and grip it. Oh, grip it and rip it if you want it bad enough, I guess. So everybody, I will go ahead and finish the show for Todd, who's obviously struggling. Follow the Free Kick Pod. Follow at Todd Lewis and at the Free Kick Pod. We look forward to seeing you next week on the AAT Sports channel. More news to come, and we're out.
With that said, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.
God damn it.